Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ari Schwartz. I'm Managing Director of Cybersecurity Services at Venable and the coordinator of the Cybersecurity Coalition. And we're having this webinar today with a focus on cybersecurity considerations of telework. We are going to have a really good set of presentations today, starting with some folks from NIST and moving into some follow-up from the private sector and members of the Cybersecurity Coalition. The Cybersecurity Coalition, for those of you that don't know, is a group of 18 leading cybersecurity and technology companies that have cybersecurity divisions that work on policy issues that are of interest to the broader community. Our first set of speakers are going to be Jeff Green, who is Director of the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at NIST, and then Karen Scartham, who's the senior computer scientist at NIST. They recently put out new guidance in this area, and we'll be covering this space. Next, we'll have Sridhar Mullapati, who's SVP of Products at Citrix, and then we'll have Sean Fraser, who's advisory for federal at DO and Cisco. So why don't we start off, just kick things off and turn it over to Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Ari. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. First, big thanks to Karen and the team at NIST who worked wonders to get some new guidance on telework security pushed out last week. Doesn't always happen quickly in a big organization, but the team got it done. For those who don't know about the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, we're a center based out in Gaithersburg, a little bit off the NIST main campus, and we bring together industry, government, academia, and work together to first identify security issues that can be addressed today with existing technology, scope the problem, and actually build a solution in one of our labs, and then put out a practice guide for all to use. So it's worth checking out some of our work if it's in your areas of expertise. So as I mentioned last week, we put out 3 new products, 2 blogs, and 1 bulletin. And we're looking at this in 2 different areas. First, for the IT or security professional who's now managing a significantly increased telework population. And second, for the newly christened teleworker. So I'm going to have Karen go first, who's going to talk a little bit about security from the security professional or IT professional management perspective. Karen?
Great. Thank you, Jeff. So, as Jeff said, I'm going to be talking to you about some of the latest guidance that NIST has issued about enterprise security for telework, remote access, and even bring your own device BYOD solutions and things similar to BYOD. So before I get into the details of the talk, this ITL bulletin is about 5 pages long. It gives you high-level information on what your organization can do to be prepared for telework and remote access security. So it talks at the beginning about the types of threats, the problems that organizations are facing, and then provides some high-level recommendations on how you can address those threats through planning and implementation. The information in the bulletin is derived from a NIST publication, NIST Special Publication 846, and I'll have its title and full number up on a later slide. But all the information that I'm going to be covering in the next 10 minutes is all really taken from that document. So I'd encourage you, if you are, if you hear things that intrigue you in this talk, by all means, check out that NIST publication for a lot more details than I can provide here. So next slide, please. So in terms of enterprise planning, ideally we'd all like to have all this time before an emergency occurs, to do telework planning, to know what the threats are going to be, to know what the environment is going to be, and to have all those plans made and implemented ahead of time. Of course, especially now, we're under exceptional and unprecedented circumstances. So it may be that your organization doesn't have up-to-date telework security policies. It may be that you have policies, and maybe even if you have policies you think are up to date, this is the ideal time to take a step back and to reevaluate those policies based on the current threat environment. We have large numbers of people who are teleworking perhaps for the first time, who are on networks that they normally don't use, and who may be teleworking for an extended period of time without physically attaching their laptops and other devices to your own internal networks. So the models that you may have used to think about threats and think about how to mitigate those threats might not hold under the current circumstances. So I'd encourage any organization to reevaluate your telework security policies and think about your controls. And to do all that also in the mindset of a zero trust model. So assume that nothing should be trusted that's out there. Think about the types of controls that your client devices should have, if it's not too late at this point to add controls to them if you need to, or tweak the way that those controls work. Thinking about using, things like multi-factor authentication, encrypting communications, encrypting storage. I'm sure you're familiar with all these things, of course. What we've done in the NIST guidance is to encourage organizations to take a tiered approach, or an approach where they define levels of telework and remote access. So, for example, you may decide that, okay, you're going to support an SSL VPN for access to certain enterprise resources, but you're only going to allow access to particular resources from laptops that your organization controls. You're not going to allow someone who is on their own personal smartphone to use that to connect to your most critical customer database, for example. So thinking about the types of remote access that you want to allow, what resources should be accessed, and what they should be accessed from. You can define tiers of access, as we talk about in 846. And then that gives you a structure, an organization for implementing those telework security tiers within your organization. So it gives you some definite structure. It gives you a fairly easy way to give people the access that they need to further the mission of the organization without giving them too much access. That's always the temptation with remote access. Just give everybody access to everything. But of course, we know that's not a great approach. And while you might have to do something like that to get people up and running in an emergency, you want to narrow that access down as quickly as you can. So next slide, please. So after you've done this planning, you have your tiers defined, then you can implement that policy in your enterprise. Some of it's just obvious things like, your remote access servers are key to all of this. You need to harden them as securely as you can. You need to monitor their security, place them carefully on your networks and protect them, again, to minimize threats to those servers. If your remote access servers are attacked or compromised, could have a detrimental effect on your organization, especially if everyone is currently working through those remote access solutions. And again, securing the telework devices themselves. Obviously, this is a lot more complicated if you bring your own device, if you're allowing people to telework from their personal laptops and smartphones and such. But, at least focus on securing your own issued devices, and that includes smartphones and tablets. It includes a whole range of security controls, and it also may require a bit of thought about your enterprise security management. It may be that, for example, you have your patch management solution configured so that you mainly download updates from enterprise patch management servers, your own. That may not scale well when you have everybody trying to download the same update from you at the same time. It may also not work for people who have really low bandwidth connections. So doing some thinking about, what's really feasibly going to work under heavy load. You may need to make some adjustments to how you do some things so that it stays as functional and operational as it can for everybody. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide. I'm going to, I have a list here of several NIST publications that are targeting telework and remote access technologies, including publications on IPsec and SSL VPNs, storage encryption for client devices, patch management, and several publications on mobile device security. So NIST has a lot of resources out there that are intended to help you, again, with the enterprise planning and implementation side of things. And so with that, I'm going to hand this off to Jeff Green.
Great, thanks, Karen. Ari, if you want to flip forward a couple slides. So the first topic that we were kicking this around a couple of weeks ago about what we thought was going to be different and where some security holes are. And one of the things that came up is that even in the normal world, everyone does a lot of conference calls and frequently virtual meetings, conference calls, webinars, whatever you're going to call them. A lot of folks don't really think about security when they're working in the context of virtual collaboration. Just myself, I can't count the number of times in my last job that I reused the same call-in phone number and passcode. I mean, it was easy because I memorized it and I could type it in quickly, but from a security perspective, it was not probably the best practice. And fairly recently, I was on another conference call when people started joining at the top of the hour for the next one. So it happens all the time. So the bottom line, from our perspective, is as with cybersecurity, physical security, really any security, use common sense. And that's why I made it rule 1 and 2, really stop and think before you do any of this. Also make sure you know your organization's rules and what platforms they have available to you and what type of tools they may have. With respect to approaching anything more than a routine call, think back to what Karen said about tiering. We suggest that you think about the sensitivity, the information you're going to discuss, think about the privacy implications if it comes out, and group it in your mind, nothing formal at this point. I mean, your organization may have policies, but if there are no policies, think of it in a low, medium, high context. No different than with digital data in terms of the types of security you should be applying to it. And, I guess the fourth bullet, toothpaste won't go back in the tube. This is like any information. Once it's out there, you're not getting it back. I don't want to tell you to err on the side of caution because we certainly don't want to over-secure things and make it logistically hard to do a call. But do keep in mind that if you have something even somewhat sensitive, once it's out, it's out. You can see on the side of the slide we have a graphic, and that's downloadable from our Cyber Insights blog. There's some links in a couple of slides. that'll give you some basic steps to walk through as you're thinking about whether or how to secure a call. And I'll hit them pretty quickly. For low sensitivity calls, my main suggestion here is make sure you know who's on the call. Do a roll call. Try to keep track of everyone who comes on. Again, for something that's fairly routine, not the end of the world if someone internal hops on or off, but at least be aware of it. And also be aware of whether you're using a commonly used dial-in. It's probably okay in some situations to use it. Just make that a conscious choice. For the medium security calls, apply the same standard to whether you're going to record it. Don't end up recording a call accidentally or by default. If you're going to record it, make it a choice. And if you're going to record it, consider whether it's something you should encrypt. If it's encrypted, think about where it'll be stored. Is it going to be on some cloud service? How long they'll delete it? What you can do to protect it there. A lot of services nowadays have a dashboard tool so you can see who's on. A lot of times you'll get those random callers. Again, when you're in the medium security world, you want to be pretty rigorous about asking who dial-in caller number 12 is, give his or her name. You may also, particularly if you're sharing information, limit the access to company-issued devices so you're not carrying the security risk that everyone hasn't taken care of their own personal device. Last bullet is really probably true for any call. Avoid side conversations for after the call ends. You can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes around ends because the call doesn't really end until you disconnect. So if you need to have a separate conversation, unless you want to have folks listening in, make sure that you're taking it offline. And then when you get to the high sensitivity calls, some of our suggestions, you don't have to do all of these. And again, this is a cafeteria menu, so to speak. You can apply any of them to any situation. And again, you have to weigh that against the logistics of getting folks on a call. But for something pretty high sensitivity, try to use a service that has a green room or a waiting room so you can control when the meeting starts. You can know who's talking to whom when, and you can control who gets in. Another tool we've seen some organizations use is locking a call once they have everyone that they expect and want on the phone. Typically, if there's a green room or a waiting room, you'll see people who are waiting and you can add them later. But locking is a good feature. And the final thing, we recommend on any high sensitivity call, again, use a one-time PIN or meeting number or link. And if you really want to be careful and make sure it doesn't get forwarded, you can distribute it just at the last minute, let people know ahead of time that the PIN number will be coming out late. Let me jump ahead to the next slide, Ari. So turning now to telework, first rules here are, again, the same thing. You want to, sorry, my phone started beeping at me. Trust your instincts. Use your common sense. You've all been around the block. Most of your teleworkers are in the same situation. They know what to look for at this point. Trust your instincts. Beyond that, there are a few pointers that I try to shorthand a little bit. First, make sure your home Wi-Fi is secure. Again, I skipped one actually. Make sure you're following your organization's rules, but that should be a given. With your home Wi-Fi, make sure that you're using appropriate security. There's a little more detail on our blog. You want it password protected. Check to make sure you have a router that is regularly being updated and patched by the manufacturer. If you have an insecure router, you're really providing an opportunity for anyone around the world to jump onto your network and see what's going on. VPNs are great tools. Most organizations nowadays offer or even require a VPN to connect to network services. It's an encrypted tunnel from you to your network. But consider getting one for your own use if you don't have it. And if we're ever allowed to go to coffee shops again, the side benefit is you can serve with confidence at a coffee shop if you have your own VPN. Next is keep your devices secure from snooping. You'd be amazed. In my old job, I had a stat. I tried to track it down. I couldn't. But the number of people who continue not to have passwords on their phones or iPads is remarkable. And a corollary to that is check your settings on your alerts. And if your alerts are going to pop up and provide either a portion of the text or a portion of the email, again, make that a conscious choice. Keep in mind that someone can just pick your phone up and see a part of your information if you have your alerts displaying substance and not just the fact of a new text or email. Next thing you've heard 100 times, but I think it bears worth repeating when we're starting to connect more devices to the networks. Basic security goes a long way, patching and updating the old cliche of being faster than the bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than the next guy. And then finally, this kind of circles back to where we started. Watch for unusual activity on any of your devices or on your network if it's slowing down unexpectedly. If something feels out of the ordinary, unusual, don't just dismiss it out of hand, particularly as you increase the volume of sensitive information you're working on at home. You may want to check with your IT desk, your support at your company if you have it. It's probably nothing, but it's worth asking. You could be looking for things like unusual pop-ups, an increase in spam or phishing emails. If you have weird redirects from browsers or windows that open or windows that don't close when you try to close them, anything out of the ordinary. The cyber version of see something, say something. All right, next slide, and I'll have, there's a graphic here also, by the way, you can also pull down from our blogs. So this is the two blogs we've put up. If you just search NIST Cyber Insights or NIST Cyber Blog, you can get to our homepage there. Love any feedback. This is a little bit new for us to try pushing stuff out this quickly. Hopefully folks are finding it useful, and if you have ideas on things that we might want to do in the future, please drop me a line and I'd be happy to consider it. Again, thanks for your time. I'll hand it back to Ari.
Thanks, Jeff. That's helpful. Here's your contact info too, and Karen's and Matt Schultz as well. Next, I also wanted to say, if you have questions, please type them in, and we're going to get to them at the end of after Sridhar and Sean have finished, and then but if you put it in first, you will get in the queue, and we will base it off of the types of questions we're getting from everybody. So please feel free to start asking questions now, and we'll get to them at the very end. So the next speaker is Sridhar Mullapudi, who is at Citrix. And you're going to drive these slides, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Ari. And thanks, everyone, for joining this webinar, as well as thanks to Venable for giving this opportunity. I've been with Citrix for almost 20 years and definitely been part of building solutions as well as helping our customers around cybersecurity, especially when enabling work to be done from anywhere, right? Teleworking from home. So I'm excited to share some of the same learnings that we've done over the past 20 or 30 years with our customers. I mean, our world definitely has changed, and I'm not talking just over the past few weeks and months, but just over the past 5-10 years. I think from speaking to our customers, a lot of them have been moving away from this traditional secure the location, secure the network, like everything on-prem with managed devices, because more and more work is being done from anywhere, right? Whether it's employees, contractors, gig workers, they want to bring their own device, use different devices. Applications are no longer just sitting in the data center, right? They're in the cloud. A lot of us use SaaS applications, not just on the personal basis, but also, from a corporate perspective. Content is everywhere, right? Not just sitting somewhere again in your data center, but a lot of cloud storage options. A lot of us use. So, it's definitely evolving a lot more. And one challenge I would say that we hear a lot from our customers, especially when it comes to remote working, is it can complicate life for workers, right? Because traditionally, what happened is as things have evolved, right? Everything used to be in the data center, locked device, managed device. You go to a place to get work done. As things have evolved, everybody's in every location, right? You're bringing your own device. And some of the challenges that IT has traditionally done is kind of put one tool or another, and it just complicated, not just from a security perspective, but it also complicated the life of the employee itself, right? In some cases, even affecting the employee experience, their productivity and engagement, because they have to deal with a lot of things. They want to get their work done from multiple devices, right? Pick their devices, not just one device that IT typically gives. They have multiple access solutions. Sometimes, now obviously in these times, you're all working from home, but traditionally it's been multiple locations, a lot of passwords, account to manage. And while we all have traditional VPNs, I think doing a full tunnel VPN to the full network can be challenging from a security perspective. So we've always built solution where, we really secure the connection between the user and the application and really make it more contextual as opposed to enabling a full access to the network itself. And as part of our journey, I would say over the past 20 years, there we've been helping, employees work from any device. We've kind of built what's called a unified Citrix workspace, right? One place where employees can go to get their work done. It doesn't matter if they're accessing their applications and desktops through a traditional, like a virtual desktop or a virtual application, or they're accessing a SaaS application like, Salesforce or Workday or Oracle or SAP. We ensure it's a unified experience, and as well as making sure the security and IT controls are built in, right? Again, this notion of creating this balance between user experience and security, where you're not throwing more and more security and IT tools that are degrading the user experience, because that kind of, defeats the whole point. And this is where, we've launched, a few years back, this notion of a Citrix workspace, which is a consumer-like experience, right? You can access it from any device. Doesn't matter if it's your Mac or Windows. It could be a BYO machine, because it all runs in a secure container where IT has full controls on what the user can or cannot do, whether it's downloading, uploading contents, or what kind of information they have access to. I provide single sign-on to all your applications and data, so it doesn't have to be just your SaaS applications, but your on-prem or legacy applications all using a clear single sign-on. And we work with a lot of providers, including Cisco as well, on enabling multi-factor authentication, to ensure when they're logging to their workspace or applications, it's contextual. At the least, it's two-factor authentication, if not multi-factor authentication, or based on risk as well, depending on the type of customer. We take this VPN-less approach. What I really mean by that is, instead of trying to do a full network-level VPN access where the user gets full access to corporate network, which is, in my view, high risk, and we really enable a per-app VPN type approach, where essentially you're securely encrypting the connection and the data between the user and the specific application he or she needs, right, or the content. And again, building this as a cloud solution as well, and our customers have options to deploy both modes in a hybrid cloud fashion. It's easy to scale as their applications as well as their users grow. And this kind of shows a little bit of a picture you can see for a typical customer or end user of our customers, like what they get through their workspace itself. Here it's a mix of applications. I mean, we definitely label some that talks about on-prem, right? So you can see it's a mix of applications that are sitting in the data center with some Office applications like Office 365, as well as their content. Again, the storage could be sitting anywhere. It could be on-prem, it could be in OneDrive or Google Drive or some other drive, or their on-prem file storage locations. It's all seamless to the user, or they just want to access their virtual applications and desktops. In fact, recently, over the past, I would say 4 weeks, what we've seen, a lot of our customers turn one of the capabilities just built in, remote PC type capability, right? One of the fastest way, especially for customers who haven't moved to the cloud or virtual applications or desktops or workspace. They have a lot of desktops. They're sitting in the desk. Now nobody can get to it, so they can easily turn them into a remote PC type deployment as well, using the same infrastructure they've been using Citrix for a while. And second point from an IT perspective is we've built in security and performance analytics, and recently we've seen a lot more interest in this, just because, as more and more users start teleworking, they want to understand, what is the performance like for the users. For example, here in this screenshot, you see we have this notion of user experience scores. So as more and more users are teleworking or working from other locations, you can understand who's having a great experience, who's not having a great experience, being more proactive to understand, how you can help the users and where the issues are, whether it's a device perspective or a network or an application, and making sure your users having a great experience no matter what device, what location they're using. The second side of it is also providing security analytics. So we understand the risk of users, as well as, for example, if you see excessive file downloads and things like that to the local machine, if you enable that policy, you can understand and analyze a little bit of user entity and behavior analytics for the same thing. And I think as Karen talked about it, essentially, we followed the industry standard approach of enabling a zero trust framework and an architecture, right? And some of the key elements as part of that is contextual and secure access. The reality is the monitoring and the assurance that we need to do before we give access to an employee needs to be continuous, right? It's not just like you've logged in once with a two-factor authentication and you have access to all that information. Sometimes authentication changes, sometimes the status of the device changes, sometimes even the username password that you thought was good in the morning might not be good anymore because it had, some cybersecurity incident. So when we work with our identity integrations, we pull all that information and can make contextual decisions so we can block access in real time. It's not a static world anymore, right? So that's kind of what we mean by continuous monitoring and continuous assurance. BYO and any device security is critical. I think Karen talked about basic things about encrypting devices, encrypting hardware, hard drives, and making sure the company managed devices are secure. At the same time, a lot of our customers actually use our technologies where they really don't even care in some way the security of the device because they essentially completely have a lockdown access to their corporate network where the users are not able to upload, download. In fact, within our application itself, we can detect keyboard logging and anti-screen scraping and those things that let us block access to applications or things that they can do within the access to applications, right? We might give them access to an application, but not let them print or upload or screen scrape or download and things. So just providing more granular access to all the security controls and ensuring we reduce exposure to internal and external threats. All providing a way for all your users to have a secure location for all their collaboration content needs as well. And one of the key tenets for Citrix has always been, and this is true while we've been building on-prem products, plus over the past 10 years building more and more cloud services, is really standards-based compliance and certifications, right? And this is kind of, some of them are industry specific, whether it's HIPAA and PCI and others, and also being compliant with regulations like GDPR and other technologies as we go more into cloud, like SOC 2 certifications and others. So we strongly believe in a standards-based compliance and certification and making sure our customers have the most assurance when it comes to deploying our products or using our cloud services. Back to you, Ari.
Great, thanks. So next we have Sean Fraser. We've gotten some good questions already, so please keep asking them. We will get to them at the end, as I said, and we will, as of right now, I think we can answer all of them. But let me move on to Sean from Cisco and Duo. He can take us from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari, and thanks everyone for joining us. Sridhar, I am a 20-year veteran of a teleworker, so I have a lot of experience, I would say, scar tissue in teleworking, and I'm saying that this from the perspective of the technology enables it, so we need to get to a point where we have enabling technology broadly, and then we have kind of enabling security more succinctly as we do this stuff. So I'll talk about this. So telework, and I deal a lot with public sector, and you think about kind of what happened 10 years ago, February 2010, in the DC area. If you were living there, you remember we had Snowmageddon, which is where we really started thinking about how telework was going to kind of enable our mission continuity and enable the ability to have a robust and agile workforce. Good example of that, if you pay attention to what's going on in the federal government, the OMB released a memo M-20-19 yesterday on a Sunday, which is important, that talks about the kind of harnessing this technology for mission continuity. So that's exactly where we're living. So this was 10 years ago. This has kind of forced us to have the bigger telework conversation. This is also the event that forced me to move out of the DC area and move to sunny Northern California, where I reside now, because I'm not real good with snow. One of the challenges with telework, though, is that there's a cultural thing. So people always kind of forget about the fact that we all have users and we got to deal with users. There's also some cultural issues that we kind of have to work through. And Silicon Valley is not immune to this. Silicon Valley is actually, it's a challenge to telework in Silicon Valley, because there is some benefit in having people show up in the office and have conversations around the water cooler and conversations in the break room that we kind of get used to. And even when we're steeped in technology, sometimes these things are not necessarily easy to overcome, but there is technology there that enables this that we have to kind of seek out, make it easy for end users to use, so we can then kind of reinforce this ability of being able to be remote in times where we really do need it. In past times, a lot of our high-tech communications capability was in the network, was in our four walls of our agency, of our corporation, and we were kind of lacking if we went outside those four walls. So as Jeff pointed out, if I was sitting at a Starbucks 10 years ago, it would be a lot harder to do my work than it would be today, sitting in a Starbucks with all the enabling technology. And one of the biggest challenges is when you're kind of forced to an event where, in most days you would have a 10% telework workforce, and now all of a sudden you're 100% or 90% telework workforce, and the technology that you've kind of wrapped around this access capability hasn't kept up with that level of change or that level of scalability. Then that's where you start to see some of your challenges. And one of the biggest challenges, which Jeff pointed out really well, and actually Sridhar said as well, is just the user ability challenge. So if I'm at home and I don't have a good BYO policy or process, I will find one. If you give me a file sharing system within my organization that doesn't work, I will use Dropbox. I will use something else. So the users will find a way, because guess what? Users and people in general are resilient, and we need the technologies to be resilient there as well. And we can't have technologies that punish users, force them to go outside of their normal workflows. We need to have it be just DNA. We need to have it be just part of what they do every single day as part of their working life, and it needs to be very integral so that their end user experience is not so much this, it's a lot more like this. So when you're doing telework, it's just kind of seamless. Everything just kind of works. And the good news is the technology is there. We're living in a world now that we weren't living in 10 years ago, where a lot of our workloads are in the cloud. A lot of our access capability are mobile. We're all carrying around computers in our pocket. And the network has become so robust that there isn't really a lot of difference between my connectivity here at home in sunny Northern California, or a Starbucks, or an airplane, or anywhere that I happen to go. So the technology is really enabling us to do this in a very robust way. And as far as collaboration and being able to kind of keep in contact, there are all these technologies, whether you're a government agency or whether you're an enterprise, you're leveraging all of these things, and all this stuff is resilient and it's in the cloud. You start with kind of Office 365 for collaboration. You've got all these other collaborating technologies, which, by the way, when you have large events where people cannot get together and have that camaraderie, think back to the slide where I was talking about the office interactions. I mean, I'm seeing cases where people are getting on WebEx meetings, getting on Zoom meetings, and having happy hours and having some of these other office things that weren't necessarily technology things, but this technology is enabling a broader conversation. It's enabling a broader collaboration, not just on the work technology and the work, which is important, but also just on us as human beings. The important part to think about, though, is that the attackers are still there, and actually they're a little closer than they were, right? Because we're now all sitting in the same neighborhood, and while they may not be after our cereal, our Lucky Charms, they're going to come at us with the lowest common denominator. The identity is always risky, right? The identity is always the first level of exposure to an attacker or to someone coming in to try to get access to something. And it didn't matter whether you were in your network or you're outside your network, but now that you're outside your network, you're sitting right next door to all the attackers on the interweb. So everyone is kind of, sitting in the same network and the same access, and you need to be more vigilant, especially if you're using your own technology, your own personal technology. So again, you can't use the corporate technology for whatever reason. You have a BYO program, or even if you don't have a BYO program, you need to stay vigilant with the fact that phishing is still a thing. People are trying to get access to your credentials. And at the end of the day, what they're really after is their access to your data. So your data is still at risk, and even more so at risk. So as Jeff pointed out, you need to be very cognizant of this. You need to be thinking about it, thinking about the access that you do. But the other thing is we can't put all of this on the end user. We can't make the end user fully and wholly responsible for the security of our environments. We have to help them do that as an enterprise, as an organization. So it's a challenge, right? So how do we do that? Sridhar talked about one of the things, and I think even Karen had mentioned it. Zero trust lifestyle will help you find a way. What zero trust is, it really is the concept of do work anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. Your location is not dependent, or your security is not dependent on your location. It's more dependent on access methods, secure access methods, leveraging things like biometric, leveraging strong authentication with multi-factor authentication, leveraging strong device posture assessments at time of request. So that way you're doing things in a very simple way, in a way that's very performant and is not disruptive. So you're allowing the kind of elastic security technology to exist in order to enable your remote workforce and have it not get in the way of your remote workforce. So the other point is to make sure that you have a very simple way for your user to collaborate. And whether it's sitting in their network, which they may normally do, but today they're not doing, or whether they're sitting on their personal laptop in their home office or in their kitchen, at their kitchen table, making sure they have an easy way to access the applications. And by the way, some of these applications might be on-prem, might use a VPN to get back in there. VPN is not a naughty word when it comes to zero trust. But a lot of these applications, like in this case, Box or WebEx or some of these other, are cloud-based. So let the user go directly to that with strong authentication while also doing that strong device posture assessment. So that way when the user comes in, if they're not in a good posture, you can kind of very gently let them know that. You can give them a warning period. You can block them based upon that, or you can, in a very nice, helpful way, help them upgrade to get to the best posture so that they can access that application. The goal is to make sure that this end user experience is as resilient and as transparent as possible. And that's really what kind of the zero trust philosophy or lifestyle helps you enable in your remote access solutions. So making sure that whether it's a mobile device or whether it's just a laptop or an access device or even a desktop. If they're at home, they may have a desktop that they're using. They had to dust off in order to do teleworking because they weren't used to doing this. But making sure it passes the sniff test before it gets on the network. And if it doesn't, making sure that you're kind of helping the user make the good decisions how to update it. And if they can't update it, have a process in place by which they might be able to use a device that is capable of accessing that application. The goal is to make sure that this is as transparent and as seamless as possible and consistent. So, when we get back to the point where everyone's, kind of, maybe back in the office, a little bit in the office, still a little bit of telework, because, by the way, we have issues in all of our towns where we've got commute issues. So you don't want to get on the road and do 2 hours of traffic. Maybe telework is a good option for you. So we get to the point where we've enabled the workforce to be more flexible about where they work in the future. And this is very important. The other important point around user-based authentication is because leverage the commercial technology that's available, leverage the wearables, leverage the biometric, the things that are kind of built into the platforms. And this gives you two things. It gives you a stronger level of security posture for your user access as well as your device access, but it also is a more well understood technology construct, right? These are things that people already know. There is already a familiarity with using my watch with Apple Pay when I go to Starbucks to buy my latte. Why can't I use that same technology to authenticate to a network or authenticate to an application that exists that my organization is providing for me? So leverage these things gives you those two benefits. It gives you much better security because a biometric is much stronger than a password or some other lesser form of authentication, but it also allows the user to use technology that they are already comfortable with, so something they're already using in their personal lives. And this is very important because, again, this is about enabling the users to do their work, and we have to do that because work and users will always find a way. And Ari, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks a lot, Sean. So we're now going to move to Q&A. I think that was helpful overall viewpoint from both industry and government. The first question someone asked actually was if we could go back to the slide on that has. If I can push it. Yeah, there it is. The slide of the blogs from NIST. So there. I'll put that up for folks to see again. Meanwhile, another question that we received was, have there been any announcements by state AGs or federal actors related to relaxed enforcement, as so many people have started working from home like this? So I think that's true for a lot of different areas, that there have been announcements. Sean, in his presentation, mentioned the new OMB memo that came out just yesterday, M2019, and that actually has this question in it. It also refers to M2016, which is another OMB memo, and that actually allows for a lot maximum flexibility for agency leaders in terms of compliance. So that is to support mission delivery. We have heard from, at least from our side of Venable, from regulators as well as agencies that do more direct compliance work, that there is room for flexibility, and they do expect that companies and agencies to be asking for flexibility, and they are able to do some things that they normally would not be able to do because of the situation. So can't promise everything, but you can look at those memos for guidance. Yeah.
It's also worth pointing out that it also points to M1917, which is the updated identity guidance around, do I have to use a PIV or a CAC to get access to things, and it gives you alternatives to that. So if you're faced with an emergency or faced with an event where you've got to spin up access very quickly, you have a lot of options.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this came out on a Sunday, as Sean said, so it is. They knew that they needed to get it out very quickly, and I think folks should take a look at it because it does give a lot of flexibility in exactly the way that Sean was talking about. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that on the federal side?
Not off the top of my head. I think you hit it. Sorry.
In terms of state guidance, I mean, that's individual by state, and most of them have not put out guidance at this point, but I think that there has been some discussions about flexibility that I've seen both from the AGs and from the governors. And so I would talk to them. Anyone have a response on that on the state side in the panel? Okay. So on next question. So Trudeau, you mentioned that you responded to this, but just in case other people had that question, there was a question about where the security compliance information is about Citrix Workspace and how people can see how it relates to compliance issues.
Yeah, I think I asked Taylor to post a link. Essentially, we have a trust center where we talk about privacy, compliance, and other questions. So hopefully you'll see it in the answer link itself that has all the information for our existing products, cloud services, and where we are.
So then the third question, which is, it says there are so many cybersecurity-focused related organizations such as NIST and CISA and CCDOE, and are they working together? And I think the answer to that is yes, they are working together, but I'll pass it to Jeff to talk about NIST's role here versus Department of Homeland Security and Energy and maybe DOD as well, and maybe DOJ as well.
Short answer is yes. I would say that, can you guys hear me? All right, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Short answer is yes. We are coordinating. I've talked with folks at CISA. We're kicking off potentially a new effort looking at gaps to fill in on between some of the telework guidance that's been out there by NIST for years and new telework practices and new technologies, and we hope to collaborate a little more in depth. I mean, with respect to what we put out in the past week or so, we were really trying to move as quickly as possible. So we worked with partner agencies at the end to try to amplify, but we were really basing a lot of what we had off of existing guidance, which is already fairly well coordinated across the federal government. There's not right now a concerted effort to say from the top down, who shall put out guidance on what issue. I don't know whether that will come both for resources or if it's even that wise. NIST tends to take a different perspective than a lot of the security-focused agencies, and I think that that voice is often a little different, gives a little different perspective, solutions-focused at times. So I think you'll continue to see different voices. The other thing to keep in mind is that we are not a regulatory agency, NIST, so we are really putting out genuinely best practices guidance that you can follow. Energy, DHS, others that have some regulatory role might be putting out things that are specific to existing regulatory authorities. Oftentimes that will refer back potentially to 853 or other NIST standards. But everyone has a little different piece to play. I apologize if it does sound confusing. If you want to see the general overall NIST guidance, there is a Cybersecurity Resource Center, CSRC, which you can search for on NIST that will put it up. And also DHS has done a really good job of aggregating the various guidance out there. I think they have it under a COVID-19 cybersecurity page. So you can see what is going up. So long answer to a short question. Apologize.
No, that's good. Thank
you. And I will add a couple sentences on that from Jeff, if I can. Anecdotally, what we're seeing is that all of these things are kind of related. We're seeing CISA work very closely with NIST. We're seeing NCCOE work very closely with everybody, specifically around what we talked about with Zero Trust, right? So if you look at the Zero Trust work that NIST is doing, 800-207, there's a building block that NCCOE is working on. CISA is very intimately involved in that. There's, what CISA is working on TIC 3.0, so for us public sector folks who know what that is. And there is a remote worker, teleworker component to that, right? There's a use case to that. So all of these things are kind of intertwined.
Great. We were asked to show the first Citrix slide again, so I'm putting that one up. I'm not sure that's the one that the person is looking for. Maybe it is because it does have Schroeder's contact info. So if that's what you're looking for, but if not, they also put up this one. Maybe that's the one that people want to see. So we have a bunch more questions here. When we're on, this is one that's good for pretty much everyone. But we'll start with the NIST folks on it, and then Sean and Schroeder can respond. When we are on Wi-Fi networks we don't own or control, what should we be doing to increase our security?
Oh, you throw that at me? I would say NIST folks?
Yeah, let's start with you.
Yeah, the short answer is make sure you have a good VPN. And the other thing you can do is not go on the Wi-Fi network and tether to your phone. That's not NIST guidance. That's personal guidance. I'm at the point in most hotels, if I have good cell reception, I'll just tether to my phone because I feel like I got a little more control over that. So VPN on your device or tether to your phone are my quick answers.
So I will say yes, but to Jeff's answer, I think that again, if we think back at kind of what Zero Trust is, the concept is the network is already compromised. So obviously we want to make sure the network is encrypted. You're using WPA-X or whatever you're using for encrypted Wi-Fi, but you can't necessarily rely on that. You want the strong encryption between the user access and the application. The VPN would make perfect sense if you're coming back into your network to get access to something. It doesn't make a ton of sense if you're going out to Salesforce or to Workday or to pick some cloud service. So from my perspective, it's on an application by application basis, but that is not where all of your security eggs are.
Any other responses? Okay, here's another one for NIST. I mean, other people can respond to it too, but it's directly towards NIST. It's, for a comprehensive guide, do you recommend using 846, specifically for guidance identifying channels for remote access that need to be secured for teleworkers? Is that the right document?
Karen, you still there?
Yeah,
sounds like right up your alley.
Karen is one of the authors of that document, so.
Yeah, you definitely want to look at 846, yeah, if you're looking at enterprise remote access technologies.
Thanks. Question, are password managers a good idea in this kind of situation, and how do they help?
I can take that one. Yeah, if you use a password, and we do kind of still live in a password world, there are some instances where in the government we don't use them, but they still exist. Absolutely, because the best practice is to have a different password for every application, where you can then, take it away should that application become compromised. And the password manager is the only way you're ever going to do that, and we don't want to have 100 sticky notes stuck to your monitor. So absolutely.
Okay, well, while we're on it, we can add another authentication question for you. Why does turning on multi-factor or two-factor authentication help? If I have an option that doesn't rely on SMS messaging, is that a better choice? And is SMS better than not using multi-factor at all?
So there you go, 3 questions. So the first one is, why do you turn on multi-factor authentication? Because if the access to something is only something you know, and someone guesses that's something you know, or sees it on your monitor, or gets it from you in some fashion via fish or something else, that can't be the only thing that stands between a person, entity, and the access to the application. So that's why you need to turn it on. SMS-based authentication is better than nothing. If you've got nothing else, SMS-based authentication does work. But if you look at per NIST guidance in SB 863.3, it's not the best thing to pick. There are other better solutions. You could use a push-based solution or application-based solution, or a U2F solution like a YubiKey or something like that, which would be a much better option.
Yeah, and one other thing I would say regarding the password manager is, I think long-term, the whole industry and we all, including Citrix, and I think everyone else, is working towards a model where there's actually no passwords, right? For example, recently within our own workspace, we rolled out passwordless authentication, for example, using FIDO2 security keys as an example.
Yeah, and I will 2 thumbs up that as well. I think that if you look at WebAuthn, specifically FIDO2, there'll become a point in my lifetime where we won't have to use passwords anymore. So I'm hopeful that that's going to happen, but today we still live in a password world.
Okay, next question. Why is relying on good DNS and HTTPS not good enough for security in the space? That's open to anyone. I'm sure there's lots of answers to that one. So, Trita or Sean, you want to take that first?
Sure. So I think that DNS is kind of one of the building blocks of the internet. So DNS security is certainly very important. And I look at myself again, sheltered in place in Northern California. I've got access to things from my home network. My home network is protected with open DNS on the network side. I'm using encryption, so HTTPS to every application. I'm using multi-factor authentication with device posture to every application. So I personally believe that it is good enough. But I think there are some access capability things, like, again, if you're accessing an application that's within the network 4 walls, a VPN is very useful for that.
Any other thoughts on that? Does NIST have recommendations tied to that at all, Karen? Karen, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what was the question
DNS
again?
and HTTPS. Yeah, why DNS and HTTPS why aren't DNS and HTTPS and relying on good DNS and HTTPS good enough in the recommendations you guys give on their own? I
don't think that we're addressing those. We're certainly not addressing DNS in the 846. We do talk about one of the models, sort of access models we talk in there, is like direct access via something like HTTPS to an application. So we do talk about that, but pretty sure we don't talk about DNS in there.
Okay. Just a final question for me. I'll just throw it out for folks to answer. Is if you could give, if you want to give one thing for folks working from home to pay attention to, what would you tell them the one thing that they should focus on most should be? And why don't we go through in reverse order from the speaker? So, Sean, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah, I talked about a lot of these in my section. I think the main thing is don't forget about the user, right? User experience is paramount. Delivering strong security is important, but if you're not going to take a mobile device and throw it in a box and super glue it closed, that's a very secure method, but it's not very usable. So always be thinking about the end user experience.
Shooter?
Yeah, I'll definitely second what Sean just said, right? Which is, and Citrix has been preaching it for a while, which is we need to have a balance of user experience with IT controls. There are, all these security controls don't get in the way of user getting their work done. And that definitely has been how we built our own technologies in Workspace and enabling both our customers and users to securely work with their choice of device, with their choice of, network and how they want to get their work done.
Karen and Jeff, final piece of advice?
Yeah, what I would say is if you're thinking about, you're unsure what to do about checking on your home network security or your Telework security, don't know where to start, just do anything. Even if you take a step out in the wrong direction, at least you've taken the first step and you'll get going. Oftentimes the hardest part is getting off your rear end, so to speak. So don't let inertia or fear stop you. Do something, go forward.
Yeah, and I would echo that as well. I would echo that as well on the enterprise side. That it's better to be providing some sort of remote access for your users than secure remote access than not having secure remote access at all. Providing at least some protection is better than nothing.
Well, thanks to everyone. This has been great. The slides will be available, and we'll have the whole presentation available as well online. I don't know how many days it will be, but it will be sometime later this week. So thanks to all those that joined us, the audience, and then thanks, and please also join me in thanking those that were on the panel. I really appreciate your time. We'll be trying to do more of these webcasts in the coming time, and I hope that this was valuable for all of you. Thank you again.
Thanks, Ari.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.